So, thank you, Bianca Lê. Have I said that right, Lê?
Yes, that's
Uh,
perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you for coming on Future of Foods interviews. You are head of special projects at Mission Barnes. Mission Barnes, there you're working on sort of cultivated animal fats. I
That's
wonder
right.
if you can just introduce yourself a little bit and what you're doing there at Mission Barnes, the exciting projects you're working on.
Sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm Bianca Lê. I have been at Mission Barnes for about 4 years now, and really joined as a technical generalist, which means I have a academic background in cell biology, and have previously founded a nonprofit in this same space called Cellular Agriculture Australia, to really build that ecosystem, in APAC. But yeah, my role here at Mission Barnes is really a little bit of everything. We're a startup. I'm both on the business side and the technical side, so reporting to CTO and CEO. My job is really broad and vague, hence the very broad title. I can tell you a little bit more about that, but yeah, maybe first a little bit about Mission Barnes. You mentioned we focus on fat, and that's exactly right. Meat, we all know, is made up of lots of different components. That's muscle and fat predominantly. But when we think about what makes meat so craveable, so delicious, it really is the animal fat that you can't replicate with, plant oils or fats. And so when we're trying to build this new category or trying to give consumers the same experience they know and love when they're eating meat, you really want to make sure that it's not a lean cut, it's not a dry experience, or their way of cooking it isn't going to be different to conventional meat. And so we very early on knew that we had to solve this fat issue. Otherwise, cultivated meat is not going to work. And so our initial products will be cultivated fat combined with predominantly plant proteins. So, cheap, readily available, healthy proteins like pea protein, wheat-based protein, etc., to really give that texture that you want in meat. But the fat is where all the flavor is, where the juicy, succulent texture is in all of our products.
Yeah, okay. So making cultivated fats is I've heard from scientists and other entrepreneurs is easier than making cultivated. It's a much more straightforward uh, process. Is that
Yes, that's right. So that's another selfish reason as to why we chose fat first. So yeah, when you cut into a piece of steak or a chicken breast, there is what's called the grain. So the fibers that run in a certain direction, and that's mostly from the muscle fibers, right? So actually growing and culturing muscle is really complex. And scientists have only really been able to do it at very, very small scales. You need a scaffolding, you need connective tissue, you need all these external cues from its environment to tell, hey, cells, you need to grow really long in this one direction. Um, and so we knew that that was going to be a really big technical challenge that requires significant breakthroughs in research. Fat, on the other hand, are just globules, spherical balls that are cells full of lipids, so the fats that we know. And, that's structurally very simple. There's no direction that they grow into, they're just big fat cells that consume nutrients from its environment. So, in the case of cell culture, they just consume all the fats and glucose or sugars from the cell culture media. So, yeah, when you think about those two very different methods of growing meat, one is clearly much easier than the other, and it actually ends up being a lot cheaper. I can get into that in a bit, but essentially, muscle is mostly protein, which is amino acids, and fats is mostly lipids, triglycerides, which you get from fatty acids and sugars. Fatty acids and sugars are much cheaper media components than amino acids. So, for many reasons, it makes a lot of sense to start with fat, and then eventually move into muscle if that's yeah,
Yeah.
where your company wants to go.
And is it also a more viable option to scale up fats than it is to sort of scale up the meat options?
Yeah, exactly. So, with all of the existing systems that we have today to grow cells, it really doesn't make sense to focus on muscle because they don't really exist, right? And for the reasons I already mentioned, it's much cheaper, much easier to grow fat, and therefore much easier to scale fat.
Mm. So I kind of first heard about you. I interviewed Vicky Bond from Madre Brava, and she said that she bought one of your
Oh, amazing.
blended sausages in a deli. Which was interesting to me that that these products are actually available to buy in a supermarket. Although I suppose it was quite a specialized supermarket, I imagine, at the moment. So, what products do you have available, and where are they available,
Yeah.
and how well are they doing?
Yeah, so it was a limited launch, so we're not currently selling, but really we wanted to focus on getting consumer feedback. So right now we have a partnership with an incredible supermarket in the Bay Area called Berkeley Bowl, and they're really, leading the category when it comes to bringing in new products and educating consumers. So we actually have a monthly series. So we did the sale to really drum up excitement for our product and get consumers really interested in what we do. But we have a monthly education series. So it's a two-way dialogue, right? Where we want to cook on site with our chef our cultivated pork fat meatballs and talk to consumers. And it's really interesting the kind of feedback we get on not just the product itself, but how we talk to the consumers about this very foreign concept of how we can make meat. And it's been super positive. A lot of people are initially like, not too sure. I'll taste it because it smells really good. And then as soon as they taste it, they're like, oh, that's like almost underwhelming. It tastes exactly like meat.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was expecting. So it's really cool to be able to see that reaction live and to get people interested in what we do.
Yeah, no, I had that same experience. I tasted Umami's white fish last year,
Oh, oh,
and
so cool.
it was yeah, it was. I guess you expect more because there's such a build up to it, but it tasted like fish. I mean, kind of texture wise, it wasn't quite there,
Hmm.
but
Muscle, very hard.
yeah, it was just right. So, are you planning to create the whole product yourselves? Are you going to work with other plant-based companies? What's your strategy to market?
Yeah, so we are first and foremost a technology company. So what we do differently at Mission Barns is not just our product strategy, which is fat first, but actually building the entire system such that we can scale cultivated meat. So a lot of companies and a lot of cell culture companies use what's called stir tank reactors. These are large vessels that have essentially an impeller that mixes everything together. Think of it as like a blender that mixes both the cells with the nutrient media. And that is fine if you're producing biologics, antibodies, cells for therapeutic purposes. But, when you're making a solid mass, a structure that has texture, that has, it's really shear sensitive, that's not the best system, in our opinion. So we actually have designed a very novel bioreactor that uses the natural mechanisms of how cells grow. So how cells grow is that they attach onto a surface, a scaffold of connective tissue, and then they grow. And so that's called adherent cell culture. We are not changing the cells so that they can grow in suspension. We're keeping them as is to use their natural growth processes and ensure that we can grow fat at scale. And so this adherent bioreactor is something that's really unique and interesting at Mission Barns. And in the long term, we plan to not manufacture all of our products ourselves, but to actually license this technology so that manufacturers across the world in very different markets can produce cultivated meat. And that means it's much more capex light for us. It means we don't have to be, really in the market across all these jurisdictions. We want to utilize the power of our networks so that they can produce cultivated meat.
Okay, so I mean, I was imagining that sort of the cultivated fat would be a liquidy form, but is it more of a solid form?
So if you've ever cooked with pork lard, it looks exactly like that because it is that. So tallow, schmaltz, it's liquid when you heat it up, but at room temperature, it's semi-solid.
So it's spreadable almost.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So really easy to work with. We put it in, our sausages, meatballs, bacon, salami. We've got a lot of different pork products.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I believe, I mean, I think that in sort of 5 years from now, we might find it quite unusual, or it might be less common to go into a supermarket and find 100% meat burger. That
Hmm.
it might be more common for them to be blended burgers, like with sort of cultivated and mycelium or plant-based and cultivated oils and things like that. So, I mean, is that how you see your own involvement, that you will be working with lots and lots of different people and kind of blending your fats and to add flavor to other people's plant-based and mycelium-based foods? That's basically it.
Exactly right. Yep, that's exactly what we're aiming for. We don't, right now we do have our own branded products, but that's really to have control of the initial launches and establish that relationship with the consumer. But yeah, long term, we definitely want to partner with all the big food companies or the small food companies, such that this is an ingredient that can make other products really delicious and more ethical, more sustainable.
Okay. And you have regulatory approval.
That's right. Yes, in the US.
How was that process?
Painful. Really painful. Probably less painful than if you were to go through the process right now. But, over, it was 4 years of very dedicated work. I mean, no regrets. I think we learnt a lot through the process, and it has taught us, the boundaries of what we can and can't do, which is very helpful when you're very early in the scaling process. But yeah, it was a lot of back and forth with both FDA and USDA, because they are still figuring out what they want, right? So it was a lot of educating them. So this is, the review panel is mostly food scientists, but also some biotech experts. So it was a really interesting mix of scientists on that panel. And we really had to showcase, how and why it's safe, our entire process, and compare what our products look like compared to conventional pork. So a lot of studies, a lot of data, a lot of questions from the FDA. But it was, yeah, in hindsight, it was really informative, but at the time, it was extremely painful for the
Yeah.
whole company.
But I suppose, I mean, you say 4 years, but companies like Blue Nalu have been going longer than that, kind of waiting for their approval. So it's not that long, I suppose.
Gosh. Yeah, I can't comment on other
No.
companies and their process, but yeah, it's certainly felt long for a startup with very limited resources. That takes a lot of time and money away from what we think is more important work, which is scaling and yeah, getting our products out there. But we and the agencies are very confident in the safety of our products, which is first and foremost the most important thing.
Okay. So you've come from Australia, and you said that you're involved with a startup there also,
A non-profit organization,
a
yes.
non-profit organization focused on cellular agriculture.
Yeah.
So
Yes, that's right.
what drew you into this into this area of?
Yeah, so my research background is in cell biology, specifically on cardiac myocytes, so a type of muscle cell. Love science, always have, but was really struggling in the not just academia, in that your research can only go so far, but also this idea of you really have to become an expert in a super niche field that has maybe limited impact. And when I first learned about this idea of cultivating meat, and I myself am a meat eater, right? I have tried to go vegan and vegetarian so many times. I consider myself a reducitarian. I want to eat less meat, but at the end of the day, it's delicious. It's so ingrained in our culture. And it was just a no-brainer to use my skills to work on a project that is so fun. Like food science is and biotech is such a unique combination, but also has such large impact across sustainability, animal welfare, human health. It was, yeah, the very center of my ikigai, seeing all the things that I care about, all the things that I'm good at, all the things that the world needs right now. Yeah, there was nothing else I was passionate about. So it made a lot of
Okay.
sense for me.
And and what made you go to the USA rather than sort of stay in Australia? Because there are cultivated meat companies in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, there are great companies in Australia. This was opportunistic. Mission Barnes reached out and had a very open role for me, and I could really curate that position. And I was super excited about the Fat First mission, and just the fact that being in the Bay was a very new and novel thing for me. I think it was right time in my life. It was the right time in my career. And yeah, the company was at a very cool time where, they were right at the start of going through that FDA process. And I really wanted to see how that played out. No
Okay,
regrets.
good. So, what does success look like for Mission Barnes over the next 3 to 5 years, would you say?
Such a big question. I would say meaningful scale. I know a lot of companies are scaling successfully in their own systems, but there's never ever been a large scale adherent bioreactor in the world. And we think we're going to get there really soon. So being able to make that technological breakthrough will be huge, not just for cultivated meat, but actually for biotech in general, in therapeutics. I think this can have significant impact across lots of different fields. So that's on the technical side, and then some market traction in the US. So, we haven't been focused on trying to get in every supermarket or selling regularly because we know that it makes more sense to focus our efforts and resources on scale. But yeah, hopefully in 3 to 5 years, we'll have significant market traction.
So you hope that in sort of 3 to 5 years that you might be turning a profit?
I'm not sure about that. And yeah, I really hate predicting things. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, so there has been it's a strange uh, um, market at the moment. There are some companies. One that comes to mind is Believer Meats that have unfortunately gone bust recently. What do you think? What do you think that you will do differently from companies like that kind of gives you a bit of a head start or a kind of better chance?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know enough about what happened. And it could have been the best choice to have, called it quits. Because I think there is a problem of potentially going on for far too long and just wasting money and time. So definitely can't comment on other companies who have not made it. All I can say is we really believe in our technical strategy, first and foremost, and we have, with very few resources actually, we're still a small team, have made a lot of breakthroughs. And so if that trajectory continues, and our product strategy is clearly, in my opinion, the only way forward. I think we have a significant chance of doing well in the US.
Mm. There are a few other companies that spring to mind that do a similar thing, like Hoxton Farms in the UK, and Mossa Meat also have sort of said that they are going to be doing fats as well. So, is this the way forward for cultivated meat companies to sort of make that first step into commercialization?
In my opinion, absolutely. That doesn't mean it's a wasted effort to focus on muscle. I think we need both. But in my opinion, if you're a startup and you need to make returns for investors, I think this is the most viable pathway.
Okay. And so, if somebody was starting a new cultivated meat company now from scratch, what would be your advice to an
Gosh.
entrepreneur trying to sort of get into the cultivated meat business, not necessarily wanting to do fats like you,
Sure. Yep.
but
Yeah.
they wanted to enter that market. What would be your advice?
Spend a lot of time talking to people. That means people currently in the field, people who maybe had a business but then decided to quit. I think really understanding what kind of research has already been done, why things failed is going to be extremely valuable because there's been a lot of amazing work, but a lot of it has happened in private companies. I think only recently there's been more and more open access research and published research from the academic side. But yeah, I think really understanding what's already been done, how can I have a competitive advantage and actually accelerate the field significantly? I think that's, yeah, the best advice I can give.
Okay. And would you give that advice from your own, from what would you do differently if you were to start again? I wasn't going to say from your own mistakes or something, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what would you do differently if you were
Oh,
again?
that is such a good question. I don't, so many things. Hindsight is 2020, right?
Sorry to spring that question on you. I mean, I suppose it's a similar question to what would you advise a startup? Because if you are advising
But I think a startup now versus starting when we started is very different. There was not much going on when we started, right? That was back in 2018. Now there have been so many companies that have come and gone or are still alive. So yeah, I think it's slightly different. I would say maybe something to do with the FDA process. I don't know. If I could turn back time, I would have just not spent too long on the answers to each of the rounds of questions and just get answers to them really quickly. I think we were trying to be super duper careful with all of our responses. Took at the beginning like months to, get perfect data to them, but actually quick, uh, frequent communication with the FDA is something that could have saved us a lot of time.
That's very interesting. So when you went through the process, did you have a consultant working for you, or was that going to be too expensive?
We did it all in-house, but of course use, external, um, legal counsel. We use, other scientific labs for analytical testing, things like that. But it was all internal because um, we are fairly vertically integrated. We have our own bioreactor, our own cell culture media, our own pork fat cell lines. So yeah, it made a lot of sense to keep that knowledge in-house.
Because of the secrecy of the IP, you mean?
More so just the internal knowledge of our systems. We had an amazing team who, in my opinion, and an incredible quality and regulatory team who really knew our system back to front. And yeah, I mean, of course, we had some consultants who were advisors for our process, but we really led the charge there.
Okay, because I was speaking to a regulatory consultant recently, Gregory Jaffe, who who recommended that nobody, but obviously, he's biased because he's the one who's employed. But he was explaining the process, and it sounded far more complicated than the UK or perhaps Europe or probably Australia, because there are these two bodies, and they don't even know themselves necessarily which one is going to be which one you need to deal with, the FDA or the FDSA.
I would say US is actually pretty advanced compared to EU, right? Like I think EU is going to take a really, really long time to get cultivated meat regulated. Just their general stance on technology is really quite conservative. And, GMs, for example, is a huge red flag, a huge no-no to the um, EFSA. So I
Yeah.
actually think US has done a fairly good job compared to other jurisdictions to have really open communication about how they plan to regulate cultivated meat.
Yeah, it seems that the problem with EFSA is that their stick is too big. So if you make an application and you get something wrong, then it immediately fails and you have to start all over again.
Is
That's
that right? Gosh.
yeah,
Yeah,
and they don't have a pre-consultation stage either.
exactly. Exactly.
Quite
Yeah.
easy it's quite easy to fail if you don't get it right. So it was
Yes.
interesting you were saying, and I'll let you go after this, but you were saying that when you started in 2018, it was a different market, I suppose. Was there a lot more enthusiasm for financing these sorts of processes, these sorts of projects than perhaps there is now? Has that enthusiasm lapsed over the last couple of years, do you think?
I think the enthusiasm has changed. I think investors are far more realistic about their expectations, and founders are trying to educate investors as much as possible on what is realistic and what they should expect. So I think for the savvy investor, when they truly understand what the technology is and not expecting, we're going to displace animal agriculture by the end of 2030, which were some of the claims that were floating around back then. I think those investors are still enthusiastic. I will say there's still a long way to go in educating the general VC community, but I think, at least for us, we're very fortunate that we have very smart investors who are in close communication with us.
Okay, and is Mission Barnes is it going to be going through another raise soon, or is it private money?
Soon.
Yeah,
Yes.
soon. Okay. Well, good luck with that, and perhaps we'll speak again at some later date. And thank you,
Thank you so much,
Bianca, for
Alex. It was
coming
fun.
on to the program. It's been lovely to talk to you.
My pleasure. Great to meet you.